The ARK report book, film, and presentation are not politically motivated. For the record, I have to say that, and it is true. Digging and exploration on the Temple Mount and Qumran in the tunnels, etc., is a dangerous proposition, as you'll all find out, both physically and spiritually. Please be advised that Moskoff Media, Israel, in no way provides license or encourages in any way ascending to forbidden areas on the Temple Mount, although it is becoming very popular, and or conducting exploration in any of the designated areas prescribed herein without the previous consent of the official rabbinical, halachic, and Israeli antiquities and conservation authorities, which is very difficult to get, that govern these sites. The research provided herein regarding the location of the Ark of the Covenant and related artifacts in the tunnels, etc., is strictly academic. Next. Okay, just a bit on the book. All the facts and more are in there, and actually for this group it's going to be 20% off for $15 as opposed to almost double, I guess, at Amazon. But it does have all the interviews, and it really encompasses the geopolitical relationship of what's happening in Israel now vis-a-vis these vessels and these discoveries. It's sort of the first, and it's self-published at the moment. It's going to be published hopefully in Barnes & Nobles within the next couple of weeks, God willing. In the meantime, it's part of the Stand for Israel Hasbara project, a good PR for Israel, which we very much need. And it's pretty much just in time. In fact, I'll let you in on what's going on now in Fox in New York, what they're discussing. Basically, you have this problem where everybody knows it. You see the bumper stickers, CNN lies. Don't trust the mainstream media when it comes to Israel. So there are many lectures that actually deal with, tell the truth, get the truth out there, that people shouldn't be biased, people should be well educated, well informed, and get the truth out there. The thing is, this is what people are missing. Even, people say, well, if only Obama just got it, if he only understood the Middle East and had the proper foreign policy. The truth of the matter is that he actually does get it. He's not stupid. He's Harvard. He's actually a lawyer, and they do get it. And many like him. CNN gets it. They all get it. The thing is, it's one thing to tell what the truth is, and for the reporters here. It's one thing to tell what the truth is, and I also, as part of Moskoff Media, it's also a press, we have a press pass. But what's happening nowadays is the way people interpret that truth. And Steve Lindy, the J-Post chief editor, when I interviewed him, he said this very beautifully in his interview. He said, it's one thing to tell the truth in the paper, right? But what are people going to do with that truth? How are they going to interpret it? And he brings the example. If someone believes, let's say, he goes to Auschwitz and he gets a tour and they say, the Holocaust existed. And he believes that it didn't exist. He's a Holocaust denier. He believes that the Holocaust never happened. So you can put all the truths that you want in front of him and say, look, here are the facts. But he's going to say, you know what? I don't believe it. Maybe this happened, maybe that happened. It's all a matter of interpreting those facts. That's the key. You can stand up for Israel, but know what you're up against. You're up against people that interpret the facts in a way that suits them. A similar thing could be about, everyone likes a good story, right? Me included. And that's what all the mainstream press is about. Everyone likes a good story. The Palestinian story is a great story, if you think about it. And that's why the press really loves it. Here are people, freedom fighters, fighting the occupation, and Hillary Clinton, who's also running for president, besides Mike Huckabee and others. She's made a statement recently. It's a little bit funny. She said, you know what? They had no choice. They had to put the rocket launchers in the UN facility because there's no room in Gaza. It's not their fault, so to speak. It was funny. But the way that people interpret those facts is very crucial to the way we deal with them here in Chutz La'aretz, places like this, each one of you can say, okay, here's the truth, it's coming out, but this is what we're up against. People interpreting the facts the way they want to. And Caroline Glick, who's also loosely related to this, is one of my favorite columnists for J-Post. She says it very distinctly. She says, you know what? You can say all you want about what happened, the tunnels and Hamas, etc., and the recent discoveries, but at the end of the day, the mainstream media, what they're really intending on doing is they want to make Israel look in a certain way, in a certain light, whether it's incrimination or delegitimization or whatever it is. That's a good story. People want to hear that. That's the way they want to spin it. So the facts are one thing. You have to know that people, the real key is to get them to interpret those facts in a way that's according to the Torah, in a way that's true. And that's what's being discussed now behind closed doors in many areas with the media. Okay. I'm going to read a little bit just from the back cover here so that you know what people are saying. Basically, the book, according to other politicians and Huckabee, they basically say here in the advanced praise that it's the only book of its type that's really about genuine authenticity, coming from genuine Jewish sources. There's a lot of books out there about their expeditions, Christian and otherwise, but this one actually comes to prove something and inspire something that's from a strictly Jewish perspective. Okay. One moment. My trusty pen. Yes. Is it important today? To whom? Is it important to us today? To who's really involved with this? Who does it really matter to, these types of discoveries? Of course, the Israeli government is very, very interested in what's happening now with the biblical archaeology and what's happening with the digs in and around the Temple Mount, because the status quo is extremely important now for the for the talks that are happening, the ceasefire, which, by the way, is only for another week and a half. It's supposed to be a month. I don't think people really realize that, but so far so good, Baruch Hashem, and we'll see what happens. But it's definitely important for the government to keep the status quo, and a lot of us in archaeology and a lot of other Rabbanim, Mordechai Eliyahu, Alav Shalom, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, so he was very keen on getting these facts out to the public, despite whatever toll it might take with the government. The ARK itself is the interface point, as many people know. It acts as a sort of a conduit, and even now, as we prove that it's buried right there as it was 2,700 years ago, underneath Har Bayit, the Temple Mount, it acts as a force, a very strong force, and that's what gives holiness to places like the Kotel. Why does it say that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is there at the Kotel all the time? It's because of this, because the ARK is actually there underneath. And this theory actually comes to tell that, you know what, the Dome of the Rock, one of the biggest misconceptions, is that the Dome of the Rock is in a very convenient theory, the Dome of the Rock is actually the place where the temples were. And that's where the Holy of Holies was, that's the Eved HaShasiyah, which is the foundation stone. So these recent discoveries come to prove that no, that's not the case. And we have some technology that backs that up, and also a couple of big Rabbanim that are also on side now, that actually the Makom of the Mikdash and the altar, the temples, louder? Okay. Is actually, I'm talking fast maybe also, is actually a little bit further towards the Kotel. Okay, that's a very important fact to know. And how it came to be, how people came to believe that that rock under the Dome of the Rock is the actual place, and that's the holy place. But the truth of the matter is, even when the Rambam went there, when he was 27 years old, as he writes in the Sefer Chassidim that he wrote, he says he was coming from Akko under very dangerous conditions, and he went up to Dublin to pray in the Dome of the Rock. He actually went in, and even he, the Rambam, wouldn't be able to go in if he knew, and he knew, I think back then even, maybe there were some outcrops of the destroyed temple, maybe even Hadrian's temple. He wouldn't be able to be allowed in for ritual impurities, tamei mace, etc. So even he believed that the actual makom, the spot of the temples and the Ark were actually further to the south, closer to where the Western Wall is today. Going further with Aron HaBrit, with the Ark, of course it led in the military conquests. Here's an interesting fact. It's the holiest, most powerful, and perhaps costliest man-made artifact in history. No one denies that the fact that it's indestructible, and there are many, many people, including even Hitler, Mussolini, the Knights Templar that went looking for it, the Crusaders, in order to help them in their conquest of Israel and the Jews, etc. It's definitely a force to be reckoned with, and of course it was brought to popular culture by movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark, etc., which are still being watched today, hopefully by more people than me, but still a great movie. Now, the last point about the recent Gaza war, people had no idea, okay, you learn about tunnels, in Israel and underneath Yerushalayim, for instance, that where there's different theories where the tabernacle vessels are buried, etc. But many people had no clue about the hundreds of tunnels, sort of leumatze in Hebrew. One is sort of like counter to the other. You have holy tunnels built by people like King Solomon, and then you have the antithesis of that in Gaza, and you find them all over the world, in fact. Even North Korea, and this is also a very big point, that came out recently, and I have the article here. North Korea was helping Hezbollah build the tunnels in Lebanon. Their military engineers were helping them. North Korea is very involved indirectly in the wars in Israel, and that's a big. It's important to know if you're involved in this, and how they were able to assist Hamas in the attack tunnels. Many miracles happened in Gaza, no question about it. Over 4,000 tilim. I'm supposed to go back at Beit Shemesh. We had our own share, of course, of air raid science there. And you see the miracles. Really, you see them. It's very, very special. Of course, on TV, Hayali Mazal, Benet, Mazal. People talk about how they were saved, and it's sort of by chance. But really what's happening is great. Great indeed. Next. Okay. So, there's interesting theories that have spoken about where the Ark gets its, obviously its energy is from Hashem, from God. But why did these people and these groups want it so badly? Why were they looking for the temple treasures? Even today, you have people, the IAA, Israel Antiquities Authority, is very paranoid about finding these artifacts, and the Ark in particular. Can everybody hear now? Yeah? That's a yes? Okay. Why? No over there? Okay, I'll try to go a little slower. Why are people so interested in this now? And that's why even the news channels are coming out with and a colleague of mine, Simcha Yakubovich, all kinds of people that are sort of in this niche. One of them is that we're finding out some incredible things in science about these kelim, these holy vessels. One of them about the Ark itself is it's the way it's built. In fact, last time I was here, I was talking with our electrician, about the Ark being a supercapacitor, that type of conductor. Of course, gold is a great conductor of electricity, because the people that were killed, whether it was the armies that were in Israel that were being conquered by Yeshua and David Melech, and the Ark was there, what kind of power did it have, and why? So basically it says here at Rashi, it says Sha'aron Mechaleh Behem, that anybody that got close to it, it sort of had an effect on them of reducing their lifespan. It had an effect on people. And the reason why is because, and of course it levitated, it had all these incredible properties. And one of the reasons why is because it acted as a conductor. It has the way it's shaped, and I'm going to read a quote of what this electrician actually told me, which is really fascinating. How it's actually, the two cherubim on top, the two angels on top, act like a discharge, a positive and negative, and the discharge is in the middle. And it's like a lightning rod, and how the inside wood is the insulator and a positive and negative. It's very, very interesting. And where does it get its power? Where does it, from the physical perspective? Of course, there's that energy of Hashem, Chashmal, this type of power that came out and, was able to level mountains and take the enemy down in many ways. But it's there. It's sort of like the people that did die from being too close. It's sort of like approaching a reactor. It's not necessarily a punishment. It's just a side effect of being so close to such a holy and powerful object. And to bring it alive today, one day it will come out, and we're getting closer and closer. As I said before, there's only so much we can do to bring it out. There's only so much I can go in my own research before I have to stop and say, okay, I can't really go further than this. And many people stop me after my lecture and say, okay, you have all this knowledge, now what? How can this help me? How can this help the Jewish people? How can it help Israel? And the truth is, knowledge is power, as we know. And the closer we get, the closer we help to bring on that era with the knowledge that we have. And, okay, we'll move on. Go ahead, Lee. It can be found. I was up at the tomb of Aaron Cohen, actually, last year. It was an incredible expedition in Petra, near Jordan. Anybody been to Jordan? No Jordan people? You were there? Yeah, very interesting place. And so we went up, and it's exactly like it says in the Torah. He's buried on Hor Ahar, a mountain on top of another mountain. It was a kind of a hair-raising experience. Going with the Bedouin, those are my Bedouin friends over there, the keepers of the gate, and it's really like a tomb in the sky. He was really befitting of sort of like an angel that he was. But he was very batal, of course. He was nullified to the Aron. He was able to go in and out pretty much wherever he wanted until what happened to Nadav and Avihu, his sons, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Parshat Acharei Mot, and then he had to go in with, he had to bring a bull and proper offerings, sin offerings. At any rate, if you do get a chance to ever go, you can contact, or want to, you can contact me. We'll probably take a helicopter next time, instead of these crazy camel rides for hours at the crack of dawn and kamikaze Bedouin drivers. But anyway, okay, next. Finding it. It's true. It'll be a great boon for the Jewish people, and it's certainly heading in that direction. People say, what would we do with it if it were found today? Or let's say we found the menorah. Many people think it's in the Vatican, and I'll deal with that in a moment. Actually, I may as well mention it. First of all, you can't set such a thing up in the Smithsonian. You have to really have a spot for it. Yes? You have a question? Just waving. So basically what we see is there's no really place. A place like the Vatican, and where these other kelim are being kept, is really, in a way, it saves ourselves. It's the best place for it to be for the time being. I have, actually, in the book, a letter from the Archbishop, one of the highest archbishops in the Vatican, addressed to Rabbi Strobel, which is a colleague of mine in Israel, and a couple of Knesset members, who actually asked the Pope on his last visit and said, look, what's with the temple treasures? Do they exist? Are they there? I think it's about time, it went back to the Jewish people. So the reply in the letter is very factual, black and white. You can see it in the book. And it says that we, of course, as good Christians, we would have nothing, we would never save anything from the Jews. We would give it back immediately, otherwise that would be theft. And basically what we're saying is the first-hand accounts that I have here say that no, there are certain things there. Now the menorah is not there, The Aron, of course, is not there. Many people think, oh, the menorah is in the Vatican because the Arch of Titus. Actually, that arch was built before the exiles came into Rome in order to walk underneath that arch. So the depiction wasn't really made afterwards. It was actually made before the Jews came. A lot of people don't realize that fact. So the menorah isn't there. I spoke with a certain friend, Rabbi Blach, who goes there every year, excuse me, and he said to me personally that he never saw anything, any large Kehila there. Of course, there's a lot of manuscripts that are now, by the way, available online, ancient manuscripts, but no vessels of that sort. However, there's an amazing story, two stories, that seem to prove that there's something amiss. One of them, and being heard over here for the first time probably, next slide, Lee, is there was a friend of a friend actually, who was I spoke with him on the phone, and he said that he was taking religious. He wasn't religious at the time. This is about 4 years ago. He was taking a course, a medicine course, at Vatican University, at sort of a doctor, a course that leads to being a medical doctor. Anyway, they have an online correspondence course by Vatican University. And his parents told him, if you become religious, and you hear this a lot, you become religious, you're cut off, from the family fortune, you have to finish your medical degree. Your choice. So he went to his rabbi, and his rabbi said, definitely take the money, just joking. No, he said, look, maybe you can do both. Why don't you find a correspondence course where you can become religious and get your degree and stay in yeshiva? So the only degree offered was this Vatican course. So by this time, he was already in a full garb, black and white, peyot, he really looked like rabbinical. And he actually finished 2 years of his course, and in the third year, they're calling him to the Vatican to finish. Pitom. Suddenly they said, you know what? We want you to come. The last semester you have to do here at the Vatican. So what did he do? So he asked his Rav, can I go to this place? Can I learn there? He said, well, you obviously can't pray over there, but if you have to finish the course, you can, go to the classroom, etc. And he went just the way he was. He went into the classrooms, and he's there about 4 months. And a friend comes up to him, one of his colleagues, and says, look, there's something, my father's in charge of the keys to the vault, Gesundheit. 4 levels down in the Vatican, my father's in charge of that. Listen, as a gift to you and the Jewish people, I want to take you down there, because there's something golden down there that I want you to see. He said, okay, sure. He took him up on it. I have a first-hand account. I heard this myself. He took him down there, and he showed him this head plate, golden head plate. Anybody know what that might be? Yes, thank you. The tzitz of the Kohen Gadol. It actually says in 2 places in the Talmud, it says that the tzitz was down there and taken by Vespian, actually, and the Sefer Torah, which was mounted in a place called the Temple of Peace in Rome. They set up this Temple of Peace. Vespian set it up and had the breastplate in there. And there's one other thing that's down there. Anybody know that Gemara? It's the parochet, the curtain that divided the Kodesh HaKodashim right there from the Kodesh. There's a parochet that was, it said it had a rib in it, exactly like it says in the Talmud. Those 2 things, and I have another account. The chief rabbi of Libya in the 1930s went there and saw it, and another account that just came out, I just printed it, actually, not to go against the establishment on purpose or anything, but this is knowledge I believe everybody should have. And there was an Italian soldier recently that was being commended for his work and maneuvers that he did. And they asked him, what would you like? One thing that I'll grant you a wish, And he said, I'd like to go to the vaults in the Vatican and see what's over there. Now this is recent. This is not, 100 years ago. Well, more recent than that. they led him down there, and he has his testimony as well. And the chief rabbi today of Rome testifies to this, that he can be believed. He said he saw something down there, some of the little vessels, and something gold in there as well, covered, tzitz, and a parochet with a rip in it. So these things are, pretty much, unless I bring them here to talk with me, they're pretty much go against the official Vatican stand that we have nothing, we don't, it's not there. Eventually, these items will come back. So my friend who was down there was offered. He said, look, what if I switch it? I'll make something that looks like gold. So it looks, do a switcheroonie type of thing. And no one will know the difference. And I'll take it back to Israel. Kodesh LaHashem. It's the tzitz of the Kohen Gadol. It's heavy duty. In fact, there's all kinds of ramifications to bringing it back. It says that nowadays, if we know where the altar is, where the Mizbeach is, we can bring it. According to this theory, actually, there's absolutely nothing there on that part of the Temple Mount. We could actually start bringing, theoretically, the Pesach, a Korban Pesach, and other offerings, even in a state of tumah, ritual impurity. And that's what the tzitz actually did, was a mechaper on that. It was actually an atonement for that, which is very, very interesting, how it could be used. Of course, you need a proper kohanim, and you need kli sharet, you need the vessels, and you need proper lineage, etc., and all kinds of different details. Rav Kook actually mentions all of them. At any rate, he decided at the last moment, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take the tzitz because he thought it was too dangerous spiritually. He said it might affect me, it might, something like that. It was actually used. Here's the rabbi. I was thanking you of this place over here, the Sephardic Kehila Center, and beautiful. And thanks to the invitation of a former student. I was right in the middle of saying how we have first-hand accounts of people that have been in the Vatican, and that goes against the official line of the Archbishop and the Pope that there's nothing in the Vatican. They have the tzitz, apparently, according to 3 first-hand accounts, and the parochet, lefachot, at least. Not the menorah, not any of the big vessels, but it's definitely interesting to note that. Okay, the place of Zion, over here. What happened was, when Shlomo Melech actually built the temple, he and see the Rambam says this in chapter 4 of Hilchot Beit HaBechira. He actually speaks of this and says that he built a special chamber, part of the temple itself, to house the Ark, and King Oshiao actually buried it under there, put it under there 25 years before the destruction of the temple. Why did he do that? There was no threat at all. Yirmiyahu, there's a couple different theories. Yirmiyahu also says that he should place it there. But it says you should place the ark in the house that King Solomon built. If you look at that pasuk in Divrei Yamim, in Chronicles, it actually says very specifically, what does it mean, the house? It's already there in the house, you would say. It means that it has to be placed in the room below that was specifically set for it in order to keep it there for the ages. The reason why is because in order for the second temple to continue, well, in this case it was the first temple as well, the ark has to be present in some form for the avoda, for the service of the Kohanim to continue. That's why he set this place. And so, all these people that looked for the ark and other vessels, they're looking for this, 4-ton golden chest with badim, with staves. But in fact, and this is the incredible part, according to my own findings, what they should be looking for, and this is why I think they didn't find anything, even in more recent history, Charles Warren, and he also confirms this theory, that they're looking for this big vessel, but in fact, it's great suspense. In fact, they should be looking for a room. They should be looking for part of the temple itself, meaning a room with gold walls, a stone room underneath Har Bayit. And that's where the ark is being held right now, for the past 2,700 years, covered with a couple skins, like it says in the Torah. Hopefully it's covered. But that's really where it is. So people they didn't find that room. They're looking for something else. And really, it's in a room that was set up by Shlomo Melech 2,700 years ago. Now here it says, Yirmiyahu and Micha say that Zion, which traditionally in the Torah really refers to the place of the Kodesh Kodashim, Zion really implies the spot where the Ark is. Ki mitzion titzei Torah. Torah will come out from this place at Zion. So the Arizal, Alav Shlomo, great sage, Jewish sage that lived in the 1600s, basically said that this pasuk, this verse, tells us that no building can be built over the spot where the Kodesh Kodashim is. It has to be over an area that's going to be plowed over like a field. That's the English translation. All right, next. By the way, people ask me also afterwards. They say, "No, so the Arabs know where it is, probably. Why don't they go and get some of these temple vessels? What's holding them back?" So my answer to them is as follows. It's true, and as you'll see from the following stories, that they also know that there's something very special underneath the Temple Mount. Excuse me. And they want a part of it. However, they may not have a lot of regard for human life, but they do fear holiness. And you can see that. They themselves will not go down there. Even though they may be kamikaze, all kinds of crazy different theories that they have. Incidentally, by the way, this may be a good time to mention it. The Quran says that if a Muslim commits suicide, he's not allowed to be buried in a cemetery. And they're very against. I'm just pointing this out. How the propaganda, the Arab propaganda machine, likes to mix politics and religion for their own purposes. But really, if they were to obey what's strictly written in their own writings, they would never think of doing half of these things. And there's a whole bunch of other testimonies to that fact as well. One of them being that even Muhammad himself used to pray towards the Temple Mount until his Jewish soldiers left him, and he decided to pray towards Saudi Arabia. Here we have the Western Wall explorations. Basically, what they tried to do was as follows, and this actually happened in the 67 war, when we got, Harabait Biadenu, famous words, an incredible moment for the Jewish people, a messianic moment, if you will. The Rabbi Goren, who was the chief rabbi of the IDF, love him or hate him, he was a hero for sure. Rabbi Getz, who was a big tzaddik, the Rosh Hashiva of Beit El. So they actually started doing some construction. His goal, and I have this documented, Rabbi Getz's goal was to go in and find the Ark. Now that we have a chance, let's go for it and try to help bring Mashiach, the Messiah. So the story goes, he said, I would like to do this. And he wrote letters to the leading Rabbanim. He said, I want to go in, and the time is now. And the truth is, it was an incredible opportunity. I have this interview, by the way, in the Soul of Barbaraya, the one you're seeing. Basically what happened was he wrote to the Gedolim, and they said, well, be careful. Mordechai Eliyahu was totally for it, by the way. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Alav Shalom, said, don't do it. Don't do it. It's pikuach nefesh. You're taking your life into your own hands. If you go into this tunnel, and you get into those tunnels where the Ark is, it could be very, very, just like it was back then, it's still extremely dangerous. You should not do it. Anyway, so he put it off until 1975. And then he decided that he wanted to go ahead and go forth. And so he waited for the right time, and he started to go in midnight during Slichot, which we're doing right now. At the Kotel, Slichot at midnight is very loud, and they started banging in through the gates with different hatchets, etc. They started getting in. Apparently they did get in, and they had like this. They they had a bit of a opening, and he says that he saw something glittering. He says he saw some of the vessels of the temple. I have this on record. And at that moment, he was tipped off. Teddy Kollek and some others tipped him off. The Arabs were tipped off, and they were literally almost lynched. At that moment, they couldn't get in. And it's actually pretty much, in a way, it's for their benefit. As the Rebbe writes in that letter, which I have, he says, you know what, when we do find the Ark, it's going to be brought out in fanfare and bekavod, with pride, Jewish pride. We don't have to hide it in secret from the Goyim. When the time comes, and God willing soon, it's going to be a source of pride for us, along with the other vessels. Okay, 1992. Next slide. Yeah. Basically, what we have here is another attempt to get in underneath the tunnels of the Temple Mount. There was some of these people know who this man is. I interviewed. He made Aliyah. And his son actually learns in Kollel here at the Bayit. He used to. Anyway, he made Aliyah, and he was on a certain trip and a tour. He was on a tour. A bunch of sort of activist types went on a tour underneath the Kotel tunnels in 1992. And at that point, they were digging the tunnel all the way up to the north. Now, if you go into the Kotel tunnels, you'll see that it goes all the way up to Via Dolorosa, right? If you follow it all the way up. Back then, they were still working on it, and Shimon Peres was sort of, giving permission here and there, sort of silently agreeing to working to get that tunnel all the way up. And basically, this group decided to go on the very last tour to go and try and bring, smuggle in some hatchets and hammers and crowbars and what have you, and try to break through the tunnel through this Warren's Gate. But something crazy happened at that point. They got in, they're digging, and they're chipping away, and the earth started shaking. It's a first-hand account. Tremors. Earth started shaking, and they're about to go in, and they wouldn't stop. Now, if I was there, and the earth started shaking, I would be like, bye. But, when you're there and you're on the verge of a huge discovery, it's hard to say bye. Anyway, they got a message out to 3 big Rabbanim. Should we or shouldn't we go forward? And at that point, many Rabbanim were saying, do it, even though it's Pikuach Nefesh, it'll be for the sake of the Jewish people, it'll help bring the redemption, etc. What happened was, they called 3 Rabbanim, Mordechai Eliyahu, Rav Avad Yosef, Alav Shalom, and one of them said, yes, go ahead. One of them said, no. And Lubavitch Rebbe, it was up to him in the end, who, as you know, is very much into, obviously, this whole inyan of the Geula, Barachamim, of the redemption. Anyway, he said, no, you cannot go in. Don't put your lives in danger. And they backed off. They decided to listen, thank God. And they backed off, but they were also tipped off, and right at that moment, again, you have a horde of Arabs coming in. At the last minute, the police came and saved them. And it wasn't Pashut. It was not. And then, of course, they took the tunnels, and they took these gates, and they closed them off. Next. Okay. Many people say, Steve Lindy in the book says that, nowadays the Temple Mount, for all intents and purposes, is given over to the Jordanian Waqf and for control, daily control. There's not much we can do about it. But back in the year 2000, Bill Clinton hired a whole bunch of think tanks in Washington to decide what are we going to do about this place called the Holy Basin, which is a matter of internationalizing the whole region of the Old City and the Har Hazeisim, the Mount of Olives, Mount Scopus, the Kidron Valley, Har Tzion. It's all being called the Holy Basin, quote unquote, in an effort to internationalize the region for a future peace initiative. So the question was, what do we do with this? How do we get the Arabs to agree and the Israeli government to agree. So one of these think tanks actually came up and said, you know what, let's put everything on top of the Temple Mount, give that to the Arabs for control, and everything underneath to the Israelis. So of course all the archaeologists that I spoke with was like, that's nuts, that's crazy. It's like your kitchen, you have a sink on top, but the plumbing belongs to someone else. So it didn't quite work. But you have people like Arafat, saying things that I call temple denial syndrome. And this is one of the things that they count on is this whole propaganda machine saying there really is nothing. There's no Jewish connection to the Temple Mount. There never was anything there that belonged to the Jews. So all this research really comes into play to disprove that theory and get it out into the media and to people like yourselves that are very interested. Okay, next. To ascend or not? Okay. Of course, this is a huge issue halakhically. People come and ask me and others, are we allowed? Are we not allowed? Of course, if you know what you're doing, and you know what the laws are, and you know where to go according to this theory along the perimeters, and you have to go to proper mikveh and 7 days for a zav, and there's all kinds of the Mishnayot. They talk about going with no leather shoes, and of course you have Crocs, but and walking stick. There are parameters where you can go. I'm not officially condoning it, for the record, but it is more and more Rabbanim, including Rav Moshe Feinstein's son-in-law, Rav Tendler, do go up there, and more and more people now are going, and it makes a big effect. Definitely makes a huge effect on having a Jewish presence up there. And it is in a surreal place, an incredible place, but it has to be done in the right way. And you should ask your local rabbi. We have one here. Of course, Rav Asiyag Shlita. Next. Here we have just a little bit. People who say, and they go on, Fox, and they say that it's written, this is Muhammad's the third holiest spot. The truth of the matter is that it's never mentioned. Yerushalayim is never mentioned in the Quran, actually, and it was only very recently. In fact, in the Middle Ages, El Kabira was the name, something to the Makabir, was the name of the Temple Mount in the Islamic texts, meaning the place of the temple. So we have these texts that come out. What happened was, and this is actually written by Rav Moshe Sternbach, who comes out and says, people thought that this was the place of the temple, the Dome of the Rock, because back when the Caliph built it, he asked the Jewish sages, listen, there's this rock standing out in the destruction of Hadrian's temple, which happened a couple hundred years before. What is this rock? And so the Jewish Rabbanim at the time in Yerushalayim said, well, that's probably the foundation stone. Of course, they had never seen it, and they led him astray, like sort of on purpose, as it were, so that he wouldn't find the actual spot. And of course, he set up the Dome of the Rock to actually function as a Muslim victory, to be a sign of the Muslim victory over the Jews. And it really isn't, to be honest, a mosque at all. It's more like a Byzantine structure. It's actually, the churches back then were built in this octagonal form. And the rock itself is really just the highest point of Har Moriah, of Mount Moriah. Next. Okay. This theory took me quite a number of years to develop. Mostly, it's in the book, most of it. And it ties together all these other different theories that came out over the years. For people who really want to know, the facts about these tunnels underneath Yerushalayim and what role they're going to play in the future. This type of publication is definitely recommended from Jewish sources, but the real thing that we're bringing out here with a theory is that as people get closer and as people discover, like the recent discovery of King David's palace on the south side of the Temple Mount, the coins that were found there. I myself was at the sifting site with Professor Gabriel Barkai recently, and we found 6 coins from that period, from the Second Temple period, amongst other things. And it's very exciting to do that, but in the end, what we have to do is we have to bring it out into the media, and we have to say, you know what, this is something that's an undeniable part of the Jewish people, presenting it, like I said before, in a way that people can interpret those facts and say, you know what, I'm going to change. I believe now that this really is part of ancient Israel. And these, if we could actually do some digging in places like on the border of Gaza, and then we would find a wealth of material. Again, politically it's not so easy, but these theories that are coming out really lend themselves to that and to strengthening the Jewish people. Go ahead. All right. 4 different entrances. For people who want to actually know more about where these entrances are, one of them, of course, is underneath the Hulda gates, which is the double and triple gates. Does anyone know where that is on the south side of the Temple Mount? Those people who have been there, there's a whole archaeological dig there. I think it's called the Davidson Foundation. But underneath that, there's a tunnel that goes down to a place, and you can see it in the Masechet Tamid and Midot. It talks about the tunnels that the Kohanim used to go through when they were ritually impure. If they had a carry, they had to go out at night and be by the fire there. They went out to the southern side, down, and I think it's the first parak of Tamid in the Mishnayot there. And it talks about where they went and exactly how these tunnels were structured. They found those tunnels in 1983 by a person named Meir Ben Dov, and he documented exactly. The good thing about that tunnel is that, of course, it's blocked off, but if you unblock that tunnel, it'll lead you directly to a place in the temple called the Beit HaMoked, where the Kohanim used to gather around the fire, and the Sanhedrin was also there, the High Court, and you could tell exactly where the layout of the temple was. There are ways, in other words, even though most people won't profess this publicly, perhaps, but there are definitely ways out there to go ahead and further our commitment and claim to Jerusalem, because really there's a fight going on for Yerushalayim in back doors and in all kinds of political circles, and you have people coming out, both Jews and Christians, that are very, very much very forceful in trying to claim and cement this claim for Jerusalem being and the Temple Mount part of the Jewish heritage. Is everybody following so far? Questions so far? Good? Cool. Of course, there's a secondary entrance is right there. The tunnels for Warren's Gate, that's a pretty obvious one. And then you have the other tunnels in Gaza that we saw during the war. The attack tunnels that are written about, where they say themselves, there were syringes in there, and there are many articles we have an article here from the Guardian Observer that talks about what they found in some of these tunnels, which is, the syringes and the IDF uniforms, handcuffs, everything you need, heaven forbid, for kidnapping the soldiers, which is exactly what happened to Gilad Shalit, by the way. He was captured through one of these tunnels. Okay. And here's a picture I took from inside the cave in Qumran. Very, very interesting site. Of course, Wendell Jones was one of the first to discover what he said was a reservoir. And if you read in Tanakh, it talks about a long tunnel that the last king of Yehuda, basically Tzidkiyahu Melech, he used that tunnel 18 miles long to escape Nebuchadnezzar. And it actually comes out in the Qumran area, the plains of Hirschel, and it's connected to the Copper Scrolls, to the whole treasure hunting ideology, and people that really are into that sort of thing, they come here. What happened when I went there was fascinating. People don't realize this, but it's actually monitored. This whole region, this whole cave region is being monitored 24/7 by cameras, hidden cameras from the kibbutz that's right across from it. For people, there's a little tiny sign that says no crossing. That's it. No fence, no nothing. And so we decided to go up there and find out. No one had been up there in 15 years because the Israeli Antiquities Authority were very adamant that there's nothing there, there's nothing to go there for. Of course, if you follow Yirmiyahu and you follow the different texts, there very well could be some really big temple treasures like Kehilim that are there in those tunnels. And the last thing that the Israeli Antiquities Authorities want is those types of discoveries will really change the status quo in the Middle East vis-a-vis Israel and sort of the way that the power is, the governmental bodies. It would really be an upset. It would be very, very difficult for them to continue. It would be a whole slew of discoveries after that, and it would really be very sort of messianic. I went up there, and all of a sudden, there was actually an air raid siren at the time. So I took advantage of that, and I ran up into the cave with my son Eli shortly behind me. Anyway, we got up there, and there were, out of the blue, police cars and conservation cars and people, coming out of the woodwork. I came with my associate producer, Jim Long, who was actually Wed Jul's right-hand man, to point out where these places are. And he said, stay there in the cave. Just stay there, he on the cell phone. So we were hiding there in the cave. At any rate, eventually we came down. Luckily I had my press pass with me. So I showed it to the authorities. And I asked them, listen, what's wrong? Like, what's up? What's going on? What's the big deal? Why all the fanfare? Think about it. These are just, caves. And they're like, well, there's a big crime was done by you going up there. I'm like, no way. Tell me what it is. He said, it was very, very chamor. I'm like, okay, fine. Let me know. You disturbed the bats. Not joking. I said, what? The bats? Bats. He said, yes, you were disturbing the bats in the caves. I'm like, are you joking? No joke. It was actually quite funny at the time, like comic relief, but they were serious. They were serious. This is what at any rate, the truth of the matter is, of course, that there's a lot in there besides bats. And there's the incense was found, the Ketort was found by Wed Jul and others. So that's one place. That's another tunnel entrance. It's very significant.